following Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another exciting Chalk Talk. We got something fun in store for you today. We are going to be discussing UL 924 and UL 1008 devices. First, I'm going to give some background. We're going to go over the different ways we can accomplish emergency lighting, specifically those centralized solutions, just real quick basics. We only have 15 minutes to learn about something a little bit complicated today, so we're going to dig right in to the meat of the presentation, which is going to be all about these ELCDs, exactly what they do, how they work, how the two different types differ from each other. And then finally, we're going to roll into some one-line diagrams. We're going to see how you can integrate all of the different styles of dimming with these products, specifically 0 to 10 volt, anytime we have any control system, and then two-wire dimming as well. We'll see what sort of topology we need to accommodate all those different styles. So there are a couple of different ways we can accomplish emergency lighting. First would be what we like to call the batteries everywhere solutions. Those would be emergency lights and battery packs. These are not going to require any emergency lighting control devices, nor would they be compatible with them. What we're really looking at here are going to be these centralized solutions. So either generators or inverters. They are going to require some ELCD functionality most of the time. So what we have is a loss of utility power. That is what life safety deals in. There's a couple different things that we can do when the power is lost. So we can have a system that continues to stay on. We would call this normally on. So when there is no emergency, we have power. An emergency happens, we still have power. Everything is just still on. Or we could do a normally off configuration, meaning that we have lights that are normally off during normal operation, and then during the loss of power or after the loss of power, we are then going to turn those lights on. Then we have switched systems. So during normal operation, perhaps those luminaires are either in the on or the off position. That is something that the building is going to be able to determine on the fly. But per code, we need to make sure that those lights are staying on in the event of an emergency and that they can't be switched off. So we need to essentially disable the switched functionality. So how do we do that? We do that with emergency lighting control devices. These devices are going to override your lighting control, be that a normal snap switch, a dimmer, an occupancy sensor, a dolly controller, whatever you have. When we have an emergency, we need to override these systems. And that is going to provide for us a path of egress that cannot be turned off or dimmed. We want full brightness out of those luminaires. There are two types here, which most of you are probably familiar with. The 924 device is the most common. You'll hear this called different things, sometimes ALCR, maybe shunt, or an emergency relay. That gives a little hint as to how these things work, which we will discuss after this. And then we have the 1008 devices. So not too often you'll hear these called BCELTS devices. That is not a fun couple of letters to string together when you're trying to talk, so let's just call it a 1008 device. Also, these might be called emergency transfer switches, another name that pretty accurately describes exactly what this thing is and how it works. So the main core difference in functionality between a 924 device and a 1008 device is that the 924 does not switch between two power sources, whereas the 1008 device does switch between two power sources. And don't worry so much about when you want to go with one or the other right now. We're just going to learn exactly how they function. And this is the difference in how they function. So the 924 device does not switch between two power sources. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at this diagram here. I'm going to explain everything we're looking at, and we're going to understand exactly how one of these devices function. So you can see we have two circuits here, two separate circuits. We have the U on the left. It's going to go up through that lighting control and then straight to what we're calling non-critical fixtures. These are the fixtures that we don't need to illuminate in the event of an emergency, but we do want to illuminate during normal operation. Then we have this E, which sort of goes straight across and through what sort of looks like a switch. This is our relay inside of our 924 device. This is a separate circuit feeding our critical fixtures. These are the fixtures that have to come on in the event of an emergency. And then we have a couple other lines here. We have a sense line going from the 924 device to U. That is the 924's ability to sense whether we have utility power connected or not. We have a switched input up at the top. This is the 924's ability to tell whether those non-critical fixtures are in the on or off position. And then we have a fire alarm interface. This isn't present on all 924 devices, but I'm going to illustrate that functionality as well. So right now in this diagram, our switch is in the off position, meaning our non-critical fixtures are not illuminated. And our separate circuit of critical fixtures, which, by the way, that's super interesting. We have two circuits feeding just one row of lights, probably the exact same luminaires, in just one room. So two separate circuits here that are all onto one zone. When our lighting control is turned on, we will see that our non-critical fixtures are going to illuminate. That makes sense. We're just connecting the utility power to those fixtures. But what we'll also notice is that those critical fixtures on a completely separate circuit are now following the lighting control, and they are also in the on position. So what just happened is that our device is using its switched input, the one right there at the top, to know that the non-critical fixtures are in the on position, that lighting control is outputting power, and it's going to tell the device, it's going to tell itself to close its own relay and turn its critical fixtures on in conjunction directly following those non-critical fixtures. So it is emulating, it is mirroring the other circuit, and that is how a 924 device works. Now, right now, that's sort of a pointless form of operation, but for example, when we receive a signal from the fire alarm, or our sense line to utility notices that there's a loss of power, now all of a sudden those critical fixtures are able to be separated from the non-critical fixtures so that we can maintain their illumination regardless of what position the lighting control or the switch is in. So right now we have the switches open. It's not powering critical fixtures. If we didn't have this 924 device, we would not have a path of egress. But because we have the 924, its relay is shut. It's no longer listening to the switched input, and we are just delivering critical power to those fixtures when we need them. That is how a 924 device works. A 1008 device is going to do the exact same thing, but it's going to do it differently. So notice we still have all of the same main components. There is the utility power, and then there is the normally on source of emergency power. And then there's also the same exact sense lines, one before the switch, one after the switch. And there's also the same grouping of fixtures. Everything really is the same here. The only difference is now instead of having a relay, we have a transfer switch built into that 1008 device, and we do switch between two power sources now with the 1008. So right now, instead of having to mirror whether that switch is open or closed, we actually routed all of the critical fixtures directly on the same circuit as the non-critical fixtures. Another way to describe this is that we are combining the circuits and then we are separating the circuits. So you can see here that when we turn our lights on, all of the lights come on together. That's because they actually are on the same circuit this time. But when we receive a signal from the fire alarm interface, for example, or we notice that we have a loss of power, that transfer switch is going to transfer to the other position, and we are going to begin to supply emergency power. Just those critical fixtures are now being circuited to what we have labeled E here, our emergency power, as opposed to the utility power. So that's how this works, and there's some advantages to doing that. But our general considerations here, if you're using a generator to provide emergency power, you're probably going to need one 1008 type device. Realistically, it's probably not going to be a 1008. It's probably just going to be a big ATS automatic transfer switch that's going to do that functionality for you. And then realistically, you can go ahead and just use 924 devices downstream of that. And because a generator plus an ATS is sort of equivalent to an inverter. When we really are going to see 1008 devices is going to be if you have two-wire dimming. So if you have any sort of phase control dimming, we are going to need to use a 1008 device because the 924s are not compatible with that. And we are going to dive a little deeper into the dimming functionality in a second. But the main message here is that we typically want to be in 924 land. 924s are smaller, they tend to be less expensive, potentially even a little easier to deal with. There's a little bit less moving parts. So typically we're going to go with a 924 almost always over a 1008 unless we have phase dimming. If we have 0 to 10 volt dimming, we can absolutely use our 924 device. And the way that this works is it has an additional little relay in there with a little 0 to 10 volt circuit. So it's going to be able to read the output of the 0 to 10 volt dimmer so that when our non-critical fixtures are dimmed to 5 volts, again, remember our 924 device is just a copycat. So it notices that we have 5 volts coming from the dimmer, and then it is going to deliver 5 volts to the critical fixture. Then, during the loss of power, it's going to ignore this signal, and it is going to put those critical fixtures to full brightness. If we have DALI or ecosystem, really just any sort of controller, the topology works a little bit differently. So you're just going to wire up your controller like you would, and then you're going to run the dimmed bus through the 924 device, and we're actually going to use that 0 to 10 volt circuit from the 924 in order to control our light fixtures. And then we're going to dead end the critical hot coming out of the 924 device. If we have phase control, I mentioned that we need the 1008 device. So here you can see that in action. Essentially, we are just going to be routing around the dimmer. We're not going to have the dimmer be doing anything in emergency mode because we are going to switch to a separate circuit that doesn't function from that dimmer. And that's it. In summary, inverters and generators allow any architectural lights to be used for emergency purposes. In all common lighting plans, ELCDs are required to override a lighting control when we're in emergency mode. 924 devices typically are less expensive, but 1008 devices allow for phase control dimming. That's it. That's our brief overview of 924 and 1008 devices, our ELCDs. I want to mention this is just a snippet of our full 1-hour AIA course. So if we have any specifiers out there that would like to receive credit for the full 1-hour AIA course, please reach out to us. Let us know. We can usually virtually, sometimes if it's close, we could do it in person. We can come and we can deliver that course. Also, we have cut sheets. We do sell 924 and 1008 devices. These are listed on our website. Please check those out as well. As always, there will be a follow-up email with a link to this presentation as well as a PDF of the slides. I'm Tom Deutsch, and together with Evan Ackman, Greg Keel, and Matt Bird, we're here for you guys. Please feel free to reach out by email or give us a call if you need anything at all. We are here for you guys. I'm here for you guys. Should you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, and that includes right now. So please hit the chat or the Q&A function should you have any questions about 924 devices, 1008 devices, or anything else. Thank you all so much for tuning in.